Hello, thank you for watching live from Paris here on France 24. Let's take a look at the headlines. Canada's Prime Minister says Iran shot down a Ukrainian passenger jet, an accusation Tehran rejects. And as pressure mounts, it invites Boeing and Western agencies to join the investigation. Already criticized for being absent, now criticized for failing to address climate change. Protests expected against Prime Minister Scott Morrison as Australia suffers the worst wildfires on record. And with record-long transport strikes continuing in France, the Prime Minister is to meet with union leaders this Friday, but a solution to break the impasse against pension reforms is not expected. Also coming up, tensions over war-torn Libya are rising. The oil-rich nation has become the scene of another proxy conflict, luring in some of the world's biggest powers. Details in Global Grid with Chris Moore. Stay tuned to Live from Paris. Well, Western pressure is mounting for a full investigation into a Ukrainian passenger jet crash in Iran. All 176 people on board died when the plane crashed late Tuesday, shortly after taking off from Tehran. Canada's Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said his country has intelligence that Iran shot down the civilian jetliner, possibly by accident. For its part, Iran has blamed a technical fault, but details, though, may be forthcoming. Iran has invited accident investigating agencies from the U.S., Canada, and Ukraine to take part in the probe. Charlie James reports.
Brought down accidentally by Iranian air defenses. That's what U.S. officials say most likely happened when a Ukrainian airliner crashed after taking off from Tehran Wednesday. U.S. officials cited satellite data, saying 2 surface-to-air missiles were detected 2 minutes into the Ukrainian International Airlines flight. That was quickly followed by an explosion in the vicinity of the plane. It's a theory echoed by Canada's Prime Minister, whose nation lost at least 63 citizens in the crash.
We have intelligence from multiple sources, including our allies and our own intelligence. The evidence indicates that the plane was shot down by an Iranian surface-to-air missile. This may well have been unintentional.
But Thursday, the head of Iran's civil aviation organization denied a missile was involved. Iran's ISNA news agency quoted Ali Abedzadeh as saying, "Scientifically, it is impossible that a missile hit the Ukrainian plane, and such rumors are illogical." Iranian authorities say initial indications showed the plane turned back after suffering a problem. They have referred to the crash as an accident. A team of Ukrainian experts joined the investigation on the ground Thursday. Kiev says it is studying several scenarios, including an in-flight collision, a rocket strike, technical problems, and an onboard blast. Ukraine's government has called on its Western allies to share any evidence that could be helpful in establishing the truth.
Well, as you heard in that report, dozens of Canadians were on board that flight, and many people have been taking part in a vigil in Toronto. Let's listen to some of those people.
Just for 2 weeks, they were to Iran and because she missed her dad too much, and because of that she went to Iran, and they stayed just for 2 weeks, and after that then they were coming back.
I did not know how else I could show the world that we are sad. That was the only way. I just wanted to, because today Prime Minister Trudeau announced that now he knows through the intelligence that our own government did this. Intentionally, unintentionally, I don't care at this point, but this is what they did.
Well, the crash happened hours after Iran had fired ballistic missiles at 2 military bases in Iraq, housing American troops. Tensions between Washington and Tehran have risen since the U.S. president ordered a strike, killing a top Iranian general last Friday. And despite criticism at home and abroad, Donald Trump has defended that decision.
Soleimani was actively planning new attacks, and he was looking very seriously at our embassies, and not just the embassy in Baghdad. But we stopped him, and we stopped him quickly, and we stopped him cold. He was a bad guy. He was a bloodthirsty terror, and he's no longer a terror. He's dead. And yet now I see the radical left Democrats have expressed outrage over the termination of this horrible terrorist. We have this tremendous military, and you know what that is? That's really a great fighting force, but I hope we never have to use it. I really do. You saw an example of that a couple of days ago. So we seek friends, not enemies, but if you dare to threaten our citizens, you do so at your own grave peril.
Meanwhile, U.S. lawmakers voted to curb the president's ability to take military action against Iran. The resolution was introduced in the Democrat-controlled House of Representatives. Some of Trump's opponents say the president should have sought congressional approval before ordering the strike. For more on what was a mostly symbolic but politically charged vote, here's Kevin Gorgestani in Washington.
With no surprise, the Democrats passed that resolution, though it has to be said that there were several Democrats, at least 8, who voted against the resolution, and several Republicans who voted in favor with the Democrats for that resolution, a resolution that limits the ability of Donald Trump to go to war, to use military force against Iran in the future. Now, there are 3 issues, though, with this resolution. The first one is that there is an exception for an immediate military attack on the United States, in which case Donald Trump or any president would not need congressional approval before retaliating against Iran. The second one is that this resolution, the Republicans say, only talks about war, using military force against Iran. And their argument is that this would not have been working for the strike on Qasem Soleimani because that was a strike in Iraq and not in Iran. And so therefore they say that, yes, the president should ask Congress for its approval if he is going to war with Iran. In this case, it was a strike that prevented an imminent threat, and therefore he did not need congressional approval. And it's hard to say that this resolution is going to do anything to strike that debate one way or another.
Well, protests against climate change are expected in Australia. This as the country has been ravaged by wildfires. Scott Morrison's government has been criticized for downplaying the risk of climate change. And this unprecedented fire crisis in the southeast has claimed at least 26 lives and destroyed more than 2,000 homes. Conditions in the country's 2 most populous states are to worsen this Friday, with temperatures and wind speeds increasing. Authorities have urged nearly 250,000 people to evacuate. Peter O'Brien reports.
There's an ominous glow over Kangaroo Island, South Australia, as evacuees gather in a safe spot ringed off by a stretch of water and brace themselves for a long day. Almost half the island has already been turned to ash, and on Thursday its largest town was cut off by the fires.
We weren't expecting to be under threat here after the last few days, but we are here now, and yeah, we'll band together. We get through tonight, and hopefully daylight comes, we can get out of it unscathed.
Thousands have evacuated as temperatures reach more than 40 degrees Celsius in several parts of the country, and winds pick up, intensifying the huge bushfires. The danger is centred on New South Wales and Victoria, Australia's most populous states.
I've noted that there's severe and extreme conditions that are across 2 states. The conditions, as we've already seen in South Australia, as they're affecting communities there as we speak. Those same conditions are now moving through southern New South Wales and Victoria.
Emergency text alerts have been sent to almost 250,000 people in Victoria alone. telling them to leave, and the military has been dropping supplies to towns at risk of being isolated by the blaze. The unprecedented fire crisis has killed more than 24 people and destroyed over 2,000 homes, leaving an area the size of South Korea scorched. Ecologists estimate 1 billion animals have died in the bushfires.
Fierce clashes broke out in Niger after assailants stormed a military base and killed at least 25 people. The raid happened near the volatile frontier with Mali, with attackers in vehicles and on motorbikes beginning in Chingodar in the western Tilaberi region. The Defense Ministry said the military did manage to kill some 63 terrorists.
On Thursday, January 9th, 2020, at around 1 p.m., the Chingodar forward military post on the Mali border repelled an attack by terrorist elements who had boarded several vehicles and motorcycles. The response with the combined air support of the Niger Air Force and our partners made it possible to strike and keep the enemy away from our borders.
Here in France, Prime Minister Edouard Philippe will be holding one-on-one meetings with union leaders throughout this Friday, hoping to quell record-long strikes against planned pension reforms. Thursday was this 36th day of transport strikes. Marches took place in Paris and other French cities. Unions claimed 370,000 people took part in the capital, while police put the figure closer to 56,000. James Vecina has more.
37 days and counting. After a Christmas break, demonstrators returned to the streets across France on Thursday. Some want the reform to be scrapped in its entirety, while others want to reach a deal. But both sides aren't backing down for now.
Striking's a sacrifice we can make for some time. Yes, the government can try to cling on and hope we give up for financial reasons, but we still have a bit of leeway.
An estimated 450,000 demonstrators turned out, according to the French ministry, a number that reached over 1.5 million, according to one union. In Paris and Nantes, tensions in certain areas rose as police and protesters battled on the streets. 20 demonstrators and 16 police officers were wounded in the capital. And unions hope to keep up the pressure on the government and expand the movement to further sectors.
We have a reform that turns the French social model upside down. And so we know that everyone will lose out with this reform, especially those who have the least means, those without steady work, and women.
The government's plan to introduce a points-based pension system would do away with the country's 42 pension schemes, many of which offer early retirement to public workers. At the heart of the discontent are also plans to extend the retirement age from 62 to 64 years old, a move that the government says it would be ready to negotiate. The Prime Minister will be holding more talks with the union leaders this Friday.
All right, time now for a look at some of the day's other stories. And today, the last day of campaigning in Taiwan ahead of major elections on Saturday. The first female president, independence-leaning Tsai Ing-wen, is expected to win a second term. That would be an outcome that could lead to further deadlock and pressure from mainland China. Voters will also be electing a 113-member legislature, where Tsai's Democratic Progressive Party currently holds the majority. Northern Ireland's Assembly could reconvene as early as this Friday. Comes as a draft deal to revive power sharing in the British province was published 3 years to the day since it collapsed in acrimony. If parties do not agree to the deal by the Monday deadline, then an election will be called. And the International Olympic Committee published guidelines prohibiting athletes from making certain protests at the Summer Games in Tokyo, including hand gestures and taking a knee. Breaking the new rules could lead to 3 rounds of disciplinary action, though athletes will still be able to express political opinions in official media settings or on social media accounts. Well, Britain passed a major milestone on the road to Brexit. Parliament approved a bill authorizing the country's departure from the European Union at the end of the month. It was an expected outcome after Boris Johnson was handed a comfortable majority in last month's general election. But it only represents the first stage, as the UK now needs to negotiate the terms of its departure with the EU. Lauren Bursticker has the details.
The ayes to the right, 330. The noes to the left, 231.
After years of turmoil and uncertainty, Britain's parliament has finally spoken. The UK will become the first country to leave the European Union. The vote marked a major milestone in the country's drawn-out efforts to leave the bloc. The bill now needs to be passed by the unelected House of Lords and ratified by Brussels in order to become law, but neither are likely to oppose it, paving the way for Brexit to happen by the scheduled deadline of January 31st, a departure that would only be the first step.
Once this bill has been passed and the withdrawal agreement ratified, we will proceed swiftly to the completion of a free trade deal with the EU by the end of December 2020.
Once it leaves the bloc, the UK will need to negotiate its future relationship with the EU, which has warned of tough talks ahead. Boris Johnson is seeking a wide-ranging free trade deal while ditching EU rules and regulations, something Brussels is unlikely to agree to, as it fears unfair competition from the UK.
We will insist in this negotiation on making our economic partnership subject to a level playing field on environmental and social standards, state aid policy, and tax matters.
The two sides have until the end of the year to agree on topics ranging from trade to taxes and the environment, a timeline Brussels has called unrealistic. But with Boris Johnson having rejected the EU's extension offer and ruled out further delays to Brexit, there are fears the UK could end up leaving without a deal.